Alright guys, it's time to wrap up Rings of Power Season 2. For some of you, that might be a good thing, because I've heard from many of you in the comments that you hate the show. For others, like myself, who have been very much enjoying the show, it's a little bit sad because, like I've been saying for the past few weeks just talking about these different episodes, and this channel is old enough to remember having covered the first few episodes of Season 1. You can go check out a review I did of episodes 1 through 3 of Rings of Power. I was so severely disappointed with Season 1. I thought it was so boring and so bland, and the little glimpses that we got of something interesting and something good were just so quickly wiped away. And by the time we got to the end, which was probably the most interesting thing, the whole Halbrand is Sauron thing, the season was over. And so I was convinced to watch Season 2. I barely even knew it was coming out. Everyone said the trailers looked great. I thought the trailers looked fine. But here we are. The critic reactions were really good for Season 2, and I decided to give it a shot. So this is going to be a full spoiler discussion of not just Episode 8, the finale of Season 2, but of the whole season. So if you haven't seen Episode 8 and you are worried about spoilers, just save this video, save this segment, save this podcast to watch a little bit later, and then come back and join us for the discussion as we go along. So that is the spoiler warning. Now, before I get into my thoughts on the finale of Rings of Power, I wanted to take maybe just a minute or two to talk about some of the discourse going around about the show. I don't want to give it too much time because I just want to talk about the episode and really just the things that I enjoyed and things I didn't enjoy about this final episode. But I have to say, there's a delicate balance here because on the one hand, right, I want as much discussion as possible that comes out of these episodes, because I think the best part about talking about these things is not just me sitting alone talking to a microphone about what I think about Rings of Power, but it's interacting with you guys. It's really hearing your thoughts, and I've had amazing discussions. You can check out some comments, some exchanges that I've had with people who completely disagree with me. Some people say this is just a terrible show in my opinion. I don't understand why people like it. But then there's always the caveat of, but I respect that you like it, and I'm trying to, I wish that I liked it, and I really respect the fact and I enjoy the fact that you like it. And that's how we have these kinds of conversations, right? And to be frank, I've seen far too many comments over the past little bit that have been disparaging, insulting, hateful, and frankly are not really adding anything to the discussion. And so I have always made a pledge to respond to about as many comments as I possibly can. But I've also made a pledge, and I want to really formally say it here, to make this community inviting for people to have disagreements civilly and not just say what they want to say and go after people, whether it be people who made the show, myself, although again, that's maybe less of the point, but more so the other people in this community. I really want this to be a safe space where we can disagree with one another. And I know it's hard. It's the internet. I mean, I fully acknowledge that. But just to be aware that this channel is not a place where we tolerate, disingenuous hate just for the sake of, even if you think this is the worst show made to man, that's totally fine. You're totally entitled to that opinion. I'd love to hear why. But I'd also ask for respectful discourse and to understand that people will think differently than you. And that doesn't invalidate the way that you feel, just as the fact that the way, if I or someone else enjoy the show, it doesn't invalidate the way that I feel about the show. We're here to talk about it. We're here to enjoy the discourse, and we're here to have a good time. So that's what I wanted to say up front. Not going to go into it too much. It's the first kind of time, even in shows like The Acolyte or Ahsoka or, I don't know, Secret Invasion, I haven't quite seen this level of discourse that has risen to this kind of animosity before. And so I just wanted to address it a little bit further, and then hopefully we'll put it to rest as we go along. I'm never afraid to share my own opinion, as you can tell. I'm just here to share what I honestly think. I'm not going to cater it to anybody. I'm here just to talk about what I think. So anyways, big disclaimer out of the way. Let's actually talk about Rings of Power Season 2, Episode 8. So I have been really enjoying this season. Quick recap here. I loved Episode 1. Thought it was really good starting point into Season 2. I was so surprised at how much I enjoyed it. Episodes 2 and 3 I thought were pretty good, if not maybe just okay, kind of in that mid to good range. And then I thought episode 4 was a huge step back. I thought episode 4 was something you would see in season 1. But then 5, 6, and 7 happened. 5 was the best one yet. 5 was the best episode out of the whole, season 1 and season 2 to that point. 6 was really good. It wasn't quite episode 5 or episode 1, but it was quite good. And episode 7, again, topped episode 5. Episode 7 is my single favorite episode out of all 16 that have come out. I really I loved it. It was great. And so we get to the finale. There's a lot going on, but as the momentum has been building, I had all the confidence in the world that they were at least going to deliver, if not the best episode in the series. They didn't have to do that, but just a really solid season finale. So let's go through the episode and go through some of my notes here, and then we'll talk about my thoughts on both episode 8 and then in general the series as a whole and what I'm looking forward to and maybe what I'm nervous about for season 3, because season 3 has been greenlit to the delight of myself and to the chagrin of many, I'm sure, but we can have that discussion in the comments down below. So let's start out here. It starts out with, actually not with the Amazon logo or with the Lord of the Rings Rings of Power logo, but with Durin, and we see the culmination of the Durin storyline here, and we get younger Durin, Prince Durin, as he confronts his father in the mines. And again, it is really remarkable to see how they've turned this storyline around. I can't believe at the end of this season how invested I was in this storyline, because as he's confronting his father, I it's not like it's bringing me to tears or anything, but I really cared about what was going on here. And it is, his father is just so far gone at that point. It's kind of terrifying. And it takes a literal Balrog to come out of the ground and take down his father. Look, did it need to be the Balrog? No. It didn't. Like, I don't think the show would have been any more or any less if a random creature came out of the ground and if it was Smaug, if it was a Balrog. I don't think it makes any difference whatsoever. I think more it just represents what's going on here. And the fact that there's this thing, I think with these rings, the bill always comes due, to quote, I mean, it's a famous quote, but also just thinking about Mordo in the MCU, for example, the bill always comes due, and here comes the Balrog. And it's, I mean, obviously the visual effects I think are really good, and it's intense, right? And you kind of saw this coming. I think that for the most part, I saw this ending coming, where you kind of figured that King Durin would eventually give up the ring in a kind of self-sacrificial way. At least that's what I was thinking as the show was going on. And he does just that. And now Prince Durin is going to be King Durin. And that's just the prologue to the episode, because now, at this point, the Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power logo comes up, and then we get to the main part of the episode. So the fact that this is just the prologue is kind of amazing, actually, because it's a heavy hitter for sure. So let's get into the actual meat of the episode here. And here we go with Gandalf again. Gandalf is now in the village with the Harfoots and the other group of people that I can't quite remember who they are, because let's be real. Like I've been saying, episodes 5, 6, and 7 mostly stayed away from the Harfoots and away from Gandalf. And honestly, I think that was for the best, because I think this is probably my second least favorite storyline. Or I should clarify, the Harfoots have been my second least favorite storyline. And Gandalf himself, his own solo journey, has not been my favorite either. Probably third least favorite thing that's been going on here. I guess maybe I should really say that the Harfoots and the Isildur Theo storyline have been some of my least favorite things in this season thus far. And it's no coincidence that episodes 5, 6, and 7 have really stayed away from them. But we're back, because it's episode 8, and I think while I maybe would have enjoyed if they didn't revisit these storylines at all, I understand also that it's a TV show and they wrote storylines and they wrote story arcs, and you have to wrap them up in some way. And so we're back with Gandalf. So he's back. He's in the village. He's with the Harfoots, and I was just hoping at this point that we would just get something interesting here, and we do. We get this dark wizard who comes onto the scene. He's been kind of teased, although I'm not gonna lie, he's probably been one of the more disappointing parts of the season, because we'll jump ahead to the ending. Nothing really happens with him at all. Literally nothing happens. He's a big, giant teaser for season 3, and I guess that's fine. He's played by, I always mispronounce this guy's name, Ciaran Hinds, who played Steppenwolf in Justice League. And so you don't just get, Hinds to come in and play Dark Wizard, unnamed Dark Wizard, for just a couple cameo scenes. I'm sure he'll be back in season 3. Obviously, he had one of the last scenes in the show where he's looking out ominously. So I'm sure I've been saying it's Saruman. I'm not sure how anymore, because because, he kind of reveals, he plays his hand that he is an evil wizard. And if you've read or watched Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, you know that it's in that story that Gandalf realizes Sauron's true intentions. I haven't read, or, I don't know the lore. Maybe there's some other backstory where Saruman is evil and Gandalf knows about it, but I doubt it. But also he keeps calling Gandalf old friend, and that seems very Saruman-ish. So again, jury's out. I mean, we'll have to see. I'm pretty sure it's Saruman, and they'll find some way to have Gandalf not remember all the evil things he did, but we'll see. We'll see about that. So anyways, there is that as well. So the Dark Wizard comes in, and he has this whole confrontation and lifts a bunch of rocks, and Gandalf does the right thing. And that's pretty much the conclusion of that storyline. It was a little bit interesting to me, though, to see how much more interesting the show got when there was this confrontation. Because even though the Harfoots were there, it was really about Gandalf, and it was really about this Dark Wizard. And I thought that made, at least the Harfoots, because they were in those scenes, it made it a little bit more interesting to watch as well. So I also wish, though, that they would have stopped playing games with us a lot earlier and just told us it was Gandalf, because everyone knew it was Gandalf. And I only disliked one thing about episode 7. There are a few things in this episode that I have a couple gripes with, and we'll talk about how Gandalf gets his name, because we'll talk about that later. I have some thoughts, but all that to say is that I wish that they had stopped playing games with us a little bit earlier, and I wish they would just outright tell us who these people are, because one thing that I don't like about this show is that they try to be so coy with certain identities and who people are and who their names are, when in reality, Halbrand, Sauron, became infinitely more interesting when they revealed it was Sauron. And I don't know if they knew that or not, or if they were just, they think they're being really coy, but it's just something that I personally have been noticing, and it's something I'm not a big fan of. So we'll see what happens in season 3. We know most of the characters now. They're all being set up. It's just this Dark Wizard character, and we'll have to see what his deal is. But it is the first time, I'll admit, in a long while where I didn't actually actively hate the storyline as I was watching it. So that is, that's some improvement there. And then we get back to Numenor, and apparently there's a letter that says Sauron is allied with the Queen, and everyone goes nuts about this. It's really random, honestly, because I've been pretty invested in the Numenor storyline this season. It's not been really at the forefront of anything. I'm sure it'll be much more at the forefront next season, as Elendil and Isildur are probably going to be, taking up more. Sorry about the background noise, by the way. There's some stuff going on outside, but they're going to be taking up more of a prominent role here as we go along, because obviously Isildur needs to start taking up a more prominent role because of his place in the lore, and also because the Nine Rings, right? Like in this season, the elves and the dwarves were really taking the front seat because of the elven rings and the dwarvish rings, and also Celebrimbor. But I think in next season we're going to get a lot more about the quote unquote men, humans, and their rings. And so we'll see where that goes from there. I just, I'd like to have seen a little bit more about what was going on here with this Sauron letter that automatically just turned everyone against the Queen and all those people. It's I don't know, it just felt kind of random. I heard rumors that they're they did cut out a lot of stuff from the Numenor storyline, and I can kind of see it now, honestly, because it feels really rushed. It feels like I'm watching a kind of half-baked storyline, and it wasn't as compelling as I would have hoped it was. So there is that as well. Then we get the scene here with Elendil and the Queen Regent, and she's talking about reclaiming your destiny and all that kind of stuff, and it just feels a little bit more disjointed. So there is that. We head back to Eregion now, and Eregion is on fire. There is a really cool one-shot at the beginning of this sequence where we're just following the orcs around, and it looks really real. It honestly kind of looks like a war film, because I at least think, in these scenes, that the rubble looks really real, the debris looks very real. It looks like they filmed it on a real set, which is really refreshing. It just kind of has that gritty wartime, war movie kind of feel as they're fighting through a village, and I really like that as well. So then we have Galadriel, and she goes and meets Adar, and she's willing to give up the Nine Rings? ? It's a little bit odd and a little bit confusing to me. But then the scene where Sauron comes and just murders Adar. I mean, that's crazy. That's just crazy. We'll talk about that in just a second, because meanwhile, in the meantime, or I guess I should back up for just a second, because, Galadriel, I mean, she's not meeting Adar just yet, I should say. She's confronted by the orcs, and she says she'd give up the 9, which doesn't seem like something she would do, but I don't know. Maybe she would have in that scene. But anyways, Sauron is actually right now just torturing Celebrimbor, and it is, I mean, it's just hard to watch, but good for Celebrimbor to, defiance from him in his dying breaths. I think he was the standout of the season, along with Sauron, obviously. Those two characters together are, in my opinion, just always really great to watch. And so I really sad to see him go, but defiance until the end. And Sauron does let his anger get the better of him, because he wanted to keep Celebrimbor alive, because he wanted information about the 9. And in his anger, when Celebrimbor says, you're a prisoner to the rings, he lets his anger go. And yeah, I mean, that feels very Sauron-y. He made a mistake there, but he eventually gets the 9 rings anyways. And so I thought that was a really good scene as well. Going back though to storylines that I was not a big fan of, we have to now head back to Theo and Isildur. And again, waiting for Isildur to really step up here, because I think that characters like, I've been pleasantly surprised with characters like Elendil, for example, that I have warmed up to. He was such a non-character to me in season 1, really a non-character, but here in season 2, I've come to enjoy his storyline a lot more, and I'm hoping Isildur becomes that character in season 3. Even Arondir, towards the beginning of this season, I wasn't a big fan of what they were doing with him, but by the end of the season, him being a commander of the elven armies, really much better than whatever he was doing in season 1 and beginning of season 2. Just whole season 1, him just hanging out in the village. It was, I didn't love that. So yeah, there's that. The other really weird thing that happens in this scene is another random kiss between, is her name Estrid? I can't quite remember her name, but Estrid and Isildur. And again, back-to-back episodes with really random kisses. I didn't like both of them. They felt very rushed and very unwarranted, and I don't know. That was the one thing I really didn't like about last week's episode, and I think this one also felt just really random and kind of strange. So there is that. Anyways, Isildur is confronted now by that really annoying guy, the guy who killed that soldier from Numenor, and I don't even remember his name, but he's just so infuriating, and it's a little unclear to me how they managed to meet up at the exact same time. I think, again, a lot of stuff was probably cut from this Numenor subplot. It's a little unclear what the sequence of events is here, and it feels fine. I mean, it's setting up, again, some stuff for season 3 that I don't think is quite interesting, and I'm hoping they're going to get away from the village here, but it doesn't look like it. It seems like this occupation of this little colony is going to be something that they're going to talk about even further. So there is that. And then we get a scene with Adar. So now Galadriel finds Adar, and he offers her a truce once more, and he gives up the ring. Good for him. I mean, I think the Elven rings, based on what I've seen from the show and based on what I've read, are a little bit different. I don't think they're quite as corrupting as maybe the other rings are, because people seem to be taking them on and off, putting them on and off, and they seem to have some more good properties. Perhaps that's really because of Celebrimbor's more pure influence, and as it gets further and further, now the dwarven rings and then the human rings, maybe they're more corrupting influences. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. He also says that he had another name, and maybe I'm missing something, but I don't remember hearing what it was in this episode or any other episode. I don't know who else he could be, but that was quite an interesting tidbit to hear that he might have another name. So something that I will probably do some digging into and maybe find something out about that. But then Sauron shows up. All the orcs just absolutely murder him in a parallel to the opening of the season, and it was brutal. It was, again, Sauron just on a war path, on a vengeance path, and it is scary to see. And we get the mirroring, obviously, of when at the beginning of this season, the orcs went after Sauron and killed him, or quote unquote killed him at the beginning. And then we get a fight between Galadriel and Sauron, and she is, I think, rightfully very overmatched. This is one of the servants of Morgoth, and yeah, I mean, she is completely overmatched here. And I think that some of the illusion stuff was really interesting that he was doing later on. I think I get it that he's really good at illusions though, but I think the fact that she fell for some of them a little bit more than she should have, I don't know. I'm of two minds on that, but I think that she got over that pretty quickly as he was turning into other people. I think he was really effective when he turned into Celebrimbor, actually, which I thought was cool. but I think some of them were fine. But I do like that they were using illusions, at least, that it wasn't just a hand-to-hand combat scene, because I don't know, something about Sauron just fighting Galadriel hand-to-hand felt a little bit lame, but I think that mixing in the illusions was a nice little touch here. And then he stabs Galadriel. And this is what I was talking about in last episode, because when characters like Galadriel and Elrond get stabbed, it doesn't matter. We know they're going to survive. So it felt a little bit weird to me that they stabbed her. I guess ultimately it made more, maybe it was more about the stakes of having the dark energy in her or whatever. Maybe that'll play a part at, in the next season. Didn't seem like it was going to be playing that big of a role at the end of this season, because they seem to get most of it out of her. Maybe it's something like Frodo when he gets stabbed by the Nazgul in Fellowship of the Ring, and then it kind of affects him a little bit. I don't know. Maybe it's something like that. Also, Arondir is still alive. I completely thought he died in last episode, and he's still around. But I'm not mad about the fact that he's sticking around, because I think the role he's in now is pretty appropriate for his character. I think him being the commander of the Elvish armies is good, and the dwarves are here too. Although it's really sad because Durin is now in mourning. So there's that. Now Galadriel escapes from Sauron by falling off the cliff, and I have honestly no idea how she survived that. Really don't. But she falls, and I guess she survives. It is pretty creepy, those effects of how the darkness is coming after Sauron, the Shadow Realm, if you will. And I think that's cool, although they don't seem to really explore that in this episode, in this season. Like I said, I do think that because they eventually heal her, I guess, by putting on the elven rings. I think it's interesting how the different rings are doing different things to different people. And I'd be curious if they explored that. Obviously, they probably will with the human rings, because I think the human rings are going to really corrupting. And we'll see what happens there with those rings. But yeah, I think that... and so now we have the wrap-up. We just, in classic Lord of the Rings fashion, the ending of the season has 20 endings. So we kind of try to wrap up all the different things that are going on here. And I'll say this about the Harfoots as we get the narration here. Good on you. The actors, I respect them, obviously, and I know that they gave their best performances here that they could, but I would be very happy if these characters didn't come back for season 3, because I feel like even in the Gandalf stuff, they were just dragging the story along. And I think that hopefully now we're going to focus on characters like Galadriel and Elrond and the elves and the dwarves, Durin and Disa. And, I think the storylines that are starting to coalesce here a little bit. And I think that the Harfoots and I think the Theo storyline, I just think that we have so many storylines going on here that I think Theo and the Harfoots, to me, are things that we can maybe start to trim out of these seasons. And to be fair, this season really reduced their storylines. Again, nothing against these actors or anything. I just think that these storylines were starting to add weight to an already bulky season. The ending, I will say, because this episode was over an hour and 10 minutes, I think, and it feels abrupt somehow. And I'll talk about this more as we do our final wrap-up, but I think that, like I was just saying, I think that there was a lot here, and I'll talk about how I felt about that as we do our final wrap up. But I do enjoy the fact that this feels very Empire Strikes Back, that everything is kind of hopeless, but there's always hope. That kind of classic final scene of Empire Strikes Back where they're staring out into space and things seem hopeless, but they're never really hopeless, right? As we wrap up here, we need to talk about Gandalf getting his name. I didn't like it. Because I know I did some reading, and I heard that the way that Tolkien named Gandalf, it had something to do with the root word for staff, I think, or something like that. Where I think it's Gand, something like that, where that has a meaning. They don't need to do any of that here in Lord of the Rings, because there's no Latin, right, in Lord of the Rings, so it's totally fine. I think it's Latin. I believe I read it was Latin that Tolkien used. Anyways, but they don't have human languages here, so it's fine. It doesn't matter. But they didn't have to do anything at all, is my point. It could have just been the Dark Wizard being like, old friend, your name is Gandalf. And Gandalf's like, that is my name. That's it. That's all you had to do. Grand Elf? Are you kidding me? Grand Elf? You know what it totally reminded me of? Solo, a Star Wars story. He could have just been Han Solo. It didn't have to be anything else. It was just Han Solo. Instead, what it'd have to be, it's now, oh, you're alone. so low. I think these things are really dumb, because I think that they thought the mystery of the name was such a big deal, and it wasn't. It's Gandalf. Everyone knew it was Gandalf. That at the end of the season, all they had to do was have the Dark Wizard go, "Old friend, you don't remember your name? Your name was Gandalf." And he goes, "Of course it was." And then we move on. That's it. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. It totally isn't a big deal, because, look, I mean, his name is Gandalf. His name is Han Solo. Get over it. Like, it's fine. It doesn't matter. If the whole season was like that, I would have been so annoyed, but it's just one thing. It really doesn't matter. But still, Grand Elf, I mean, come on. Anyways. It seems like also in these final moments that the Harfoots are going to be taking a backseat, if, even returning in season 3. And again, I think that we need to start moving. We need to start moving, because the season ends and the elves are ready to fight and we are ready to go to war. And I'm excited, because I think season 2, I don't even know what season 1 was, but season 2 was a lot about the deception, right? Sauron's rise to power. We hear this a lot with movies being like, it was this character's rise to power. And they are. But I think this season was really the rise to power. Him building the rings in the shadows, manipulating Celebrimbor. I loved all those things. And I think season 3, we're primed for war. And I'm so excited, because I think the elves are going to come, the dwarves, and then we're going to finally see what the 9 rings are going to do for the kingdom, for the lands of humans, for the lands of men. And I'm excited for that. So guys, that was the season finale. But let me just quickly talk about my thoughts on the series as a whole. I know a lot of you guys have been disappointed with this series. That's totally fine. For me, I was so impressed with how they were able to turn around this show from season 1 to season 2. I was so impressed, because, again, I was in the same boat. I was so disappointed with season 1. I love Lord of the Rings. I've seen at least the original trilogy, and I've read all 4 main books, the Lord of the Rings trilogy and The Hobbit, and I love them. And I was just as disappointed, with season 1. I thought it was so boring and so bland. And here we are. And I think out of the 8 episodes, 1 was, I'm not going to say it was terrible, but it was really boring and it was really bland. So 1 was really boring. 2 were fine. 2 were really good. And 3 were top notch. Excellent. And the thing about those 2 is that it matters. The sequence matters, right? Because some of the early stumbles came in the first few episodes, right? But the show, once it hit episode 5, just continued to build and build and build and build. And I have my problems with this season finale for sure. I've just talked about them for about 20 to 30 minutes. But I think that, like I said earlier, I was alluding to it earlier, one of the problems I have with the season finale is just that there's too much going on, right? There were too many storylines that it felt like we had to wrap up every single one. Numenor, Isildur, Elendil, right? Just to kind of talk about the humans. The Queen Regent, Pharazôn, a lot of those things. And we had Gandalf, we had, the Dark Wizard, and then we have Arondir, Galadriel, Celebrimbor, Sauron, Elrond. There's just too many things going on here. Durin, right? That I think that we could definitely stand to have some, more concentration in season 3. And I think that also just having, being cognizant of what storylines are maybe more important than others. I think it'll be a lot clearer in season 3, like I said, because I think we're going to war. But I think that this season finale suffered a little bit because they were just trying to wrap up every single storyline, and they really weren't able to do that in everything, because the Dark Wizard just kind of showed up and then disappeared. And I'm sure he's going to be a big part of season 3, but in season 2 he was just kind of a whole lot of nothing. So I think that's the story of season 2, is that they learned from, in my opinion, lots of their mistakes from season 1, and there were still vestiges. There were still some residual effects of season 1, where I think you get an episode like episode 4, you get some storylines that are rushed, you get some things like the Dark Wizard, where I don't think they had room or time or whatever to fit that in. But overall, guys, this season I thought was on balance, it was great. I am very excited for season 3, especially knowing that these showrunners were able to learn, in my opinion, from the mistakes of season 1. So I can only hope that season 3 would be even stronger, just even more focused, even more concentrated. And I hope that they carry on a lot of the good feedback that they're getting from those of us who enjoy the show. Because for those of you who don't, totally fine. It's completely your prerogative to jump off the bandwagon if that is what you feel like, and watch other things that you do enjoy. So that is where I'm going to end my coverage of Rings of Power Season 2. I know it's been a little bit of a rocky road, and I want to thank all of you who have shown your support for, just the podcast and the segments and whatnot. Again, I thank you all for those of you who have been respectfully sharing your thoughts. I don't care if you agree with me. I don't care if you disagree with me. I'm very thankful either way that you were sharing your thoughts respectfully and, really contributing to the Access Blockbusters community. So guys, let me know what you thought about the finale in the comments down below. Keep the conversation respectful for everyone involved, and we're all going to have a good time. Let me know in the comments down below.